So, question of the day is, how do I encourage my man to either get a job or a better paying job? Okay, let's unpack that. So,
Give it to me like.
you noticed your man has a job, but maybe they're overqualified, or they could do better, but they've kind of become very comfortable where they are, which is definitely something we all go through. We get the comfort of the routine. I make my, $1,500 every 2 weeks. I've budgeted all my expenses. I got a nice flow going. So what's the problem? Well, the woman in the relationship sees that it's a problem because they are looking at your figures and don't see any daylight for having any kind of life, really. You may be fine with going to the movies once a month and having enough in your budget to get a six pack of euphorics, and that's your idea of fun. But for them, they don't see how you can go on a vacation at least once a year. They don't see you having the ability to take care of an emergency. They're not seeing the possibility of shopping every few weeks for things that they may like or see. So one, it's coming from a good place. They obviously see that you have potential. One, right, woman? You see that your man has potential. You're like, man, you are so smart. You're brilliant. You're really working hard. Why don't we just position you to get a better paying job? So how do you encourage your man to do that? I think the best way is to carry that weight of the vision with him and to do things like, hey, I'm going to help you put together a resume. I'm going to help you find opportunities and literally send it. Sometimes it takes that kind of hand holding initially before then he will take it over. The worst thing that you can do is criticize him or make him feel small for making a certain amount of money. I know when we first had our child, I'm not the one carrying the child. So when me and my wife first started off and she was pregnant, I went ahead and signed up for Uber. Thank God, my mother-in-law had suggested this, and me being the DePaul graduate and being this brilliant man, doing something like that seemed very beneath me. Although a few years earlier, I thought it'd been a pretty good side hustle to go ahead and start a livery service or to be a cab driver, because you get a form of wheels, you get transportation, and it's a quick way to just get a bunch of cash. I thought it was a pretty good side hustle until somebody within the industry said, you know what, you need to just finish getting your degree and get something better. Well, guess what? At that time, I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find anything. I had to make money right away. We had a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things going on. The temp agencies were flaky, or they would lie and tell you that a position meant long term, but is really just a month long because they wanted to close that contract. So I signed up for Uber and Lyft within a month's time, and I was out there on the road making money, doing things that I never thought I'd do just to bring in income. But the worst thing that could have happened is if my spouse had said, yeah, what you're bringing in is not enough, or making me feel small, like, yeah, you should be doing this. It's sad that you're sitting there doing Uber and Lyft. But what's funny is that Uber and Lyft and the gig economy industry blew up when I discovered it. So I actually made it into a career and turned it into an opportunity to actually work for one of those companies. And then after I was ousted due to my own my own actions partly, I went ahead and created a driver manuscript, essentially, a driver guide that is going to help other drivers go out there and maximize their profits and learn everything there is to learn about driving for Uber and Lyft. And that book is the Hey Smarty, read this if you drive for Uber. So it all worked out, right? God had a plan for that, even though I didn't think it was appropriate for me to work a job like that. But I saw that it was necessary to have flexibility, to be there for my young family, to be able to dive into entrepreneurial endeavors when I wished. And that was always the best thing about the rideshare industry, is you really are your own boss. You make your own schedule, you work when you want, and that's very, very empowering. So ladies, the first part to that question, or the first answer to the first part of that question, is gently encourage your man and build him up and remind him of all the great things that God thought of when he put him together, telling him his attributes and applying some words of affirmation. Be an encourager. You can be real, you can be truthful, but be an encourager and help out in any way. You know, if your man isn't strong with putting a resume together, whatnot, help him out. You guys are trying to do this together, right? Then do it together. But what you will not do is handhold or criticize until he gets so stirred up that he just changes on his own, so that he will quiet you up. That's what you don't want. That's an unhealthy way to get someone to change directions, because they're going to resent you for it in the end. The other part to that question is, how do I just encourage my man to get a job? So clearly, in that case, if you're asking that question, clearly you see potential. Clearly you see, man, if this dude just worked his butt off, we'd be good. Like, he's got all the other characteristics I'm looking for. He's tall, dark, and handsome. He's a godly man, but this dude just don't want to work. He's living off unemployment, or, he's on the food stamps. Nothing wrong with food stamps. We definitely had some food stamp action early on too. So I'm not too proud to take the food stamps. But if I got an opportunity to work, I'm going to choose that over the food stamps. Okay. So that's probably what's going on here. So how do we get to the answer? How do we get this fool in the door and on somebody's work floor? So it's the same answer. Be encouraging. Lift him up. Take an opportunity to build your house. With your friends, you're very encouraging. You're very encouraging. Girl, you did it. Girl, I'm so proud of you. Girl, oh, she started this company. Girl, wow. And then the way that women get together and accomplish things is amazing. It is the fastest way to success, is put a group of women, motivated women together, and watch them go to work and get stuff done. But when it comes to adding the dynamic of a male, it gets a little finicky there. And we don't always come off encouraging. Usually what we do is we come off demeaning. If you just get a job, like, oh my God, I'm so... And it becomes more like complaining and attacking and criticizing. And then that, if you have a very proud partner, that's going to put their feet into the ground, and it's going to be a stalemate. And that's what you don't want. What you want to do is encourage and remind them that they're not in a limited situation. They're not stuck. And if they need any help, you're there to help. Encourage your man and see what happens. That is the answer to both questions. Encouragement. encouragement, and loyalty, and if need be, you got to pull the trigger and send out his resume for him, then do it, because it's going to benefit you in the long run. People at companies have assistants all the time. People at companies work within teams. You got to be a team in your own household. So be a team. When you go to work, you don't just start tearing down your coworkers. You don't just start tearing down your team. You encourage them. You set a target and you encourage your team to hit those targets. You got to do the same within your relational dynamics. You got to do the same thing within your household. You can't tear your husband down. Now, some of you are in a situation where you've done all this. So you've probably been, most likely you've been gritting your teeth and doing, sucking your teeth and gritting them this whole time as I was speaking. So let's talk about that. Some of you are either, if you're not married and you've encouraged your man and you don't see any action steps, it's time to take a back seat to that relationship. It may be time to sunset that sucker. Because if you do all that and you're encouraging, but you're not belittling, and you've tried to help where it was okay for you to help, meaning they accepted the help, and there's no action, and you've put a deadline, like he needs to get it together by this time. If he does not get it together, then we gonna be friends until you get your act together and understand a core concept, which is there's no romance without finance, as my mentor, Mr. Carlos Sutton, has penned and made very memorable to me growing up. So if you're not married, you've applied a deadline, meaning I'm going to encourage this guy, and then he's got 2 or 3 months to get his rear in gear, and there's nothing at all, no movement whatsoever. It's time to allow him to face the music himself, and for you to move on to another opportunity, and for you guys to carry on as friends. And maybe not even that, because perhaps you'll get sucked back into the romance aspect, because we all crave for relationship, right? We're built for relationship. But I'm telling you, if you do not take a back seat to that relationship and you encourage gently and you stepped in where you were allowed to step in, and there's been no action, you're in for a world of hurt. And I don't want you to contact me, email me, ping me on Facebook, or ping me in the Telegram private group that I have, the Hey Smarty Books. If you Hey Smarty Books me in any way, HeySmartyBooks.com, contact me. Instagram, Hey Smarty Books. I don't care whatever my handle is. If you reach out to me and say, wow, it's going south, but you didn't do what I told you to do, to walk away after you saw no movement, it's on you. The second scenario is if you are married and you see no movement, you need to pray for your husband. You need to pray, and you need to give God that deadline and say, Lord, I really need him to get his rear in gear by this time. If we get it now, God's timing is always going to prevail, right? Kairos, God's timing. But be very specific with God and say, because you can't just dump him off on the curb. He's your husband. So go to God with it. Continue to be encouraging. But if you're disappointed with the lack of results, you need to show those results to his creator. Say, Lord, look, you made him. I've shown him the issues. I've shown him our potential roadblocks. I've encouraged him gently. I've stepped in where he's allowed me to step in, and he ain't budging. He is not budging, Lord. Holy Spirit, speak to him. pray that someone would intervene. Maybe somebody, another husband would reach out and encourage him as well and walk this out with him, or an opportunity would come through that. But if you've given him the flexibility and everything he needs to do to either learn a new skill or the time to apply for jobs without asking him to take out the garbage 3 times a day, and still no movement, you got to go to God with that. You got to go to God with that and just do your part. Not a fun answer to give, but if you're married, that's the answer I have for you. Because if he's in the Word and he's seeing God through you, he's going to change. Eventually, God will begin to use you to change him. The scriptures say that you're the last lifeboat for him. If he hasn't given his life to the Lord, you're the last lifeboat. All right, it is the 5-minute man time. This is the dedicated part of the podcast just for men, the last 5 minutes. So, if you identify as a woman, please go ahead and disengage your headphones. Go check your Instagram. This is where you need to bail on this podcast. This is for men only, this portion. This is the 5-minute man time. All right, fellas, listen up. I understand that some of you may be in a predicament where you're not in a relationship with the person who birthed your children. So you're either a single dad or you've been removed from your kid's household and you have a separate household than where your kids live. So if you're struggling to find work, if you're struggling to get motivated, if you're struggling because of your personal relationship with the mother of your children is strained and it's just messing you up, so you start hitting the downward spiral, you start going down a downward spiral, giving into your vices, giving up on your relationship with God, you're discouraged, and it's like, well, I guess this is what it's going to be like for me, because this pain is so deep that I can't be a constant presence in my kids' lives, that I'm just going to literally throw myself off a canyon. And this is all speaking emotionally. I have some advice for you as well. I don't want to ostracize you. Some of the previous things we talked about is very specific to that kind of relational dynamic, but I understand there's tons of situations out there where you are in a tough spot as a single male that has children outside of marriage, or maybe you've been divorced and there's just no way to really have a solid connection with your kid's mom. So this is what you're going to do. If you're struggling with motivation, you're struggling with seeing that there's a way out of this thing, this is what you need to do. Build your estate. Build your estate. Now, you all have probably been to a hotel. Now, you tell me if you've ever checked into a hotel, went into the room, it reeked of cigarettes, there was garbage all over, it had a leaky roof, water's coming in, the blinds are off, the bed sheets are dirty, the TV's not working. How many of you would stay in that hotel room? Probably not many of you would do that. You'd probably ask for a refund and go to a different one, or you would at least ask for another room. That is symbolic of your estate. It is time for you to become so independent financially that once you're in that position, it's going to give you more wiggle room to be a provider and be there for your kids. You at least need to be a provider. And it may not even happen now, because some of you are in situations where you have a very vindictive parental partner. And so put aside money for your kids. Save it up, invest it, so that when they're adults, they have an opportunity to take advantage of dad's nest egg that he left for them. Because this whole time you've been thinking about them, you've been prayerful about their future, and you walked it out by putting aside money for them. So for whatever reason, your partner didn't want to accept it, or maybe that's all they do is accept your support, but they don't allow you to really be around as you'd like to. Prepare videos and photographs and record yourself speaking to your kids. There's so many opportunities to make YouTube videos and videos on your phone, and just have an anthology of wisdom and advice ready for your kids. So when they have an opportunity to independently seek you out, you got this whole anthology of wisdom, advice, and finances for them. And you could show your prayers. You can show them your Bible where you wrote notes to them. And so they're getting that spiritual side of you as a father as well, which is so important. And that's another thing. Do not disengage from God during this time. He is going to lift you up out of this situation. He is going to encourage you to build your estate. Solomon, the richest man who ever lived, the son of King David, before he moved his wife into his home, he built his estate first. He had this huge complex built before he put in his wife. So maybe this situation didn't work out with this person. It got messy. He either got divorced or it never got that far to begin with. But those kiddos came. Build up your estate. Prepare the anthology of wisdom, advice, tangible recordings, photos, accounts. Build it up. So 18 years later, they can see Dad's been there all along. So let's come full circle here. Let's jump back to how we started off this segment. And that's if you're having a tough time finding a job, period. You're having a tough time from a motivational standpoint. You don't have to get a job as a lawyer right off the bat. Just start small, start somewhere. Maybe getting my book, Hey Smarty, read this if you drive for Uber. Maybe that's your starting point. And you learn about this rideshare thing so that you can be not only available to your kids, but work when you want to work. And you're also getting around, you're meeting people doing ride sharing, and you're discovering your city, and you feel like you're on a journey. The socialization aspect is very important, that you don't isolate yourself or get into another unhealthy relationship and you're repeating these unhealthy patterns over and over again. We want to nip that in the butt and change it. So your goal is not to establish a long-term relationship until you can finance that relationship. Because first, you need to finance your kids' futures. And once you have all this established, now you can be the bedrock for someone else and do relationships God's way this time. So ramp up. Maybe you start with, Hey Smarty, read this if you drive for Uber. And then once you get that mastered with my help, then you move on to more complex careers. And maybe this just stays a side hustle, or maybe this becomes your new career and you're satisfied with it. Whatever it is, we got to get some momentum. Take that job as a busboy. Take that job as a bricklayer. Take that job that's available as a freelance gig on Craigslist or Upwork or Facebook. Whatever it is, get some momentum going. Plug yourself into your church because you need a team behind you. You need people in your life who are literally going to go to God on your behalf and encourage you in your spirit. And this is also a time for you to get some good old therapy, some good old doctor time on the head. Get the head work done. Head work getting done is another key component of this particular part of your life. Because some of you have been through some traumatic experiences with past partners, and you're having a really tough time managing life knowing that you're not directly in front of your kids every morning. So you need to take care of your headspace. This is the opportunity for you to get that work done as well. And lastly, whatever city and state that your kiddos are in, guess what? That's your home too. Do not go to another city. Live where your kids live so that in the event of an emergency and your former partner does turn around, start giving you some daylight, you can be available to take in that sun. So just words of wisdom from me. Do not go if your folks or if your kids are in Alabama, guess what? You are now a long-term resident of Alabama. If they move to Texas, you are now a new Texan. If they move to Florida like everyone else is doing right now, hopefully that would be me. Then you need to go ahead and move your butt to Florida and become a Disney adult too.
Give it to me like